Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jason with another episode of the Inked Up Runner. Tonight, I have a guest on. This person here reached out to me years ago and asked me to did a small feature on me regarding my first attempt at a 100 miler. And it was really cool. And ever since then, I've kind of followed along with his running, and he does some really cool things with blogs. I've got Henry Howard. So thank you for joining me tonight, Henry. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on, Jason.
So like I said, I came across Henry because we met through. I'm wanting to say maybe it was Honey Stinger. I can't remember. It's interesting that the folks you meet through these different companies that that either you're like an ambassador for, or some sort of spokesman for, or whatever. And so I met him through that. So so anyway, Henry, why don't we get kind of your running story a little bit? Henry is an ultra runner, coach, bloggist. I don't know if I missed anything there. He's a jack of all trades. So tell us a little bit about kind of, where are you from and how did you kind of get into the running scene?
Sure. I'd be happy to. So originally I'm from upstate New York. Did not do a whole lot of running there as I was growing up. I wrestled in high school. And when I was in college, I, did active things, played intramural sports, did a little bit of running, but nothing serious. Just, I might have run for a couple weeks and then not did anything, maybe, played racquetball or something, but was fairly active. And then in my 20s, kind of kept that up through, my employer's softball league, or just pick up basketball with friends, that kind of thing. And so running had never really been, much of a thing as part of my life. And as my kids grew up, as they were growing up, I helped them with their sports and did some, real basic coaching. And then when they got to the point where they needed real coaching, I found myself with extra time on my hands and was still going to their games and stuff, but I had free time. And on my bucket list, I literally had run a marathon, and I was, I don't know, 41, 42. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to cross this off my list, I better like start running. And so I did. The first run was memorable, but in a bad way. And I kept at it and got stronger and faster. And a year and a half after that first miserable run, I crossed the finish line at the Indianapolis Monumental, just over 4 hours. My goal was 4 and came in a little bit over that, which kind of, in a way, inspired me to try to break that that barrier, which I did a couple of years later.
Yeah, it's interesting because my running story is kind of similar to the fact of I started running later on. I was never much of a runner earlier on, and then got into it later on, and did kind of the same thing. I got the marathon in. My marathon experience was terrible. So it was at Rock and Roll in Nashville, and it was miserable here. Nashville's humidity is this terrible, and Tennessee's humidity is humidity is terrible in general, especially anytime from March on. It's just horrendous. So I guess you got your marathon in, and when did you decide to jump into the ultra running? When did you decide you wanted to do more than, say, like the marathon distance? When did you decide you wanted to make that jump and make that big of a commitment?
I think I first really thought that an ultra was possible when I finished the Leadville Marathon. And that is obviously at 10,000 feet, start at 10,000, go up to 13. turn around and go back down. And it's still my slowest marathon by far to date, because it is such a tough marathon, especially for someone who lives at 200 and something feet of elevation. And the fact that I did that, and my coach at the time said that's basically an ultra. Yeah, the distance was a marathon, but that's, for all intents and purposes, that's kind of an ultra. Just the time you were on feet and the elevation gain and that kind of thing. And that's kind of when I thought, well, if I could do that, in a quote unquote easier 50K, that's only one more aid station, 26.2 miles and 30:31. That's just doing a marathon and heading to one more aid station. And so I did my first 50K, I think it was 2015 or 2016, and it was very flat. It was certainly, in some regard, I think it was easier than the Leadville Marathon. And knowing that I could do that, I really wanted to kind of pursue, at that time, two goals. One was qualifying and running the Boston Marathon, which I eventually did, and also just seeing where ultras would take me.
So you mentioned coaching. Did you start out initially with getting a coach, or did you just try to wing it at first? And get Hal's, like we all do, right? We all go online and get Hal's intermediate half marathon or marathon training plan, and just kind of go with that. Which way did you go?
Yeah, when I started, it was a do-it-yourself thing. I downloaded training plans, read up a lot on it, and just tried to kind of figure out what worked for me. And I really outsmarted myself in trying to come up with a training plan that would get me faster, because while my marathon times had improved, it wasn't as fast as I would have liked. So I came up with a new idea, and that did not work well. I ended up with a ITBS injury. And so at that point, I knew that I needed to trust someone else to set up, my plan, and be someone who would save me from myself, and say, let's take a rest day today, or, here's the plan, and just, put my brain on hold and let someone else take care of that for me.
Yeah, and did you notice, like, I know a lot of people see big jumps when they move to getting that coach. Did you feel like you had a pretty big jump in, like from a performance standpoint?
Yeah, in fact, the very first day with my first coach, the very first workout was yoga. And I thought, I had never done yoga before. What is this yoga stuff? I'm a runner, right? And she taught me, about the importance of cross training, and not just yoga, but core workouts as well too. And that made me a more complete athlete and helped my running. And so, while I still deal with injuries like most runners do, I definitely feel that coaching has helped me become stronger. My PR in the marathon went from 3:53 or something like that to 3:23, and did qualify for Boston a couple times. So, definitely having that expert who, can guide a runner is invaluable.
That's amazing. 30 minutes off of a marathon time. That's pretty impressive. And I think for a lot of people that really helps out. I know Jeff Browning, when I interviewed him, talked a lot about how he talked about people over 40 years old. And he talked a lot about how after you hit past that 40-year-old threshold, that you start losing that mobility,
Mhm.
and that it was critical that you incorporate some sort of mobility training into your regimen to continue to have that moving forward, because if you don't, it will continue to deteriorate regardless of how much running that you're doing.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really fascinating because I had not really heard of the importance of that until I kind of talked to him, and he really spent a lot of time talking about that. And then, going online and watching his coaching and the way he trains and whatnot, he puts a whole lot of emphasis onto like mobility training and stuff like that, which in a million years I would not have thought that would be important in running, right? So it's definitely, definitely interesting. So you're from the Midwest, right? So you focus a lot on Midwestern races. Is that fairly accurate?
I'm fortunate where I get to travel quite a bit in my job. So I do, I'm sometimes able to combine work trips with a race and that kind of thing. I do, probably most of my races are in the Midwest. I live in Indiana, where Purdue University is in Lafayette. So, a lot of my races are around here. I did the Hennepin 100 in Illinois last year, and I'm going to do that again this October. So that's one example where that's a nice close race that I can get to without having to deal with a lot of travel and that kind of thing.
But your first 100 was what? It was in California, right?
It was, and I did combine that with a work trip that was Rio del Lago, um, in uh, east of Sacramento. So I think part of it was on the Western States course. That was kind of cool to be out there with that, and that was definitely a memorable experience, and one I won't forget. And it was definitely eye opening, with some of the challenges out there on the trail that is not something I'm used to here in very flat Indiana.
Yeah, I've always heard it was funny because you really don't realize the difference in West Coast running and East Coast running. And I was this past couple, I think it was past Saturday, Saturday before last. Me and Corey Waltering was running, and him and I talked a lot about the difference between West Coast running and what it's like running on the East Coast. And you've ran on each coast
Mhm.
of it. Would you say West Coast running is harder than the East Coast?
I think that's a real individual thing because you can you can certainly make an argument for both. East Coast definitely has a lot more, I would say, uh, challenges as far as the trails themselves, the rocky, rooty nature of the trails, um, especially in some areas, and certainly the climbs on some of the courses out west are definitely challenging. And then you can also throw in the elevation, um, in places like say Colorado and Utah, Wasatch Mountains and that kind of things. And also without out west, you know, I think a big challenge too is for those early spring races, where it can heat up out west, and if we're training in winter for the Northeast and East Coast, that's definitely challenging going out there and trying to perform well in weather your body's not used to at that point. I did Zion 100. That was my first DNF this past April. It was because of an injury, not because of the heat, but I know other runners took DNFs because it just got miserably hot out there. And it's that's a real big challenge with those spring races, especially out west, where you can get cooked and you're not used to being cooked when the vast majority of your training took place. And 0 degree and another temps below freezing.
Yeah, and that heat out there is, it's more of a dry heat, right? It's not really, you
Mhm.
don't really, it's not like the humidity that we have out here when you talk about like in Tennessee or Georgia, any of those races. I was, it's interesting because it feels like these spring races out here, you like walk outside and you literally run for 5 minutes and you're like just drenched.
Mhm.
And Jeff Browning and I was talking about the difference of it as well. And there's definitely a difference. And what he was saying was he felt like that the East Coast running out there definitely helps with that running out in the West, even though the heat is kind of different, which I found was pretty fascinating,
Mhm.
because I never would have thought that in a million years. So your first 100 was in California. You got to run a little bit on the Western States course. Which part of the Western States course was it? Part of it did you get to run on out there?
I remember one of the aid stations was No Hands Bridge. So that part of the trail, did see some markers, with the little signs that said Western States Trail. Um, but it's absolutely beautiful. And hopefully I get to do the whole 100 miles sometime.
But yeah, it'd be pretty sweet. I think that's a dream for a lot of us, right?
No doubt.
No doubt, right? So I think, when did you, because you're a pretty serious runner. For somebody, I follow you on all social media and I see your posts. It seems like you're out there every single day, day in, day out. You just seems like you hammer down all the time. When did you this and we're going to get into more of why I'm saying that, but like when did it become like for myself, running kind of, it identifies who I am, right? Before I started running, I really had nothing that really super identified me as anything other than just an average guy that went to work every day, right? And now it's like my family, my friends, it's something I identify with, right? So when did it really become such a huge part of kind of like your day-to-day thing?
That's a great question. I think it was in that time when I got that first coach and, kind of had some real basic success to it. And just, it was weekly interaction where, and I could email the coach if I had a question midweek, but it was always that check in on the weekends. And I think, wanting to be accountable to my coach. And so to be accountable, as long as I wasn't dealing with an injury and it said, whatever miles on the training plan or whatever core, whatever yoga, I wanted to be accountable. I wanted to, get it done. And as I saw that, my fitness improved and my running improved, then you're kind of feeding that addiction, right? You see the success, you see the gains, and then you go to a race, and regardless of how you perform, especially in the ultra community, it's such a welcoming community. So there's a lot of positive reinforcement, both in as you develop as an athlete, and then whether it's a volunteer in an aid station that makes your day, or someone you're chatting with during the race, or the friends you're going to the race with, that kind of thing. There's so much good that comes from running that it makes it easier to rise and get that running for me before 0 dark 30. And that's because I know that that's going to pay off when I get to run with friends again, or I have a good race, or as a coach that I can inspire one of my athletes to have a good race.
So And I think that's big that you hit on that, because like I think it does kind of feed into wanting to do more, right? Because you do one distance, you want to move on to the next. And like, I guess when you got to run Boston and you finished Boston, did you kind of feel like that was like your kind of like your Super Bowl, so to speak, or is like Western States kind of like your Super Bowl?
Boston was interesting to me because um, it was a training run of sorts. To back up the year before, um, in April, I was supposed to do, actually it was May. Yeah, it was a year before in May, I was supposed to do my first 100K, and I'd been working toward that for a long time. It was supposed to be in Virginia, UROC, Ultra Race of Champions. And the Monday before, I woke up and my gut just didn't feel right, and I wasn't sure what it was. And um, I, kind of pushed through breakfast, tried to, just eat some food that I thought might, help it go away. Ended up getting sick and went home from work sick. Just could not, I didn't know what was going on. Um, Went to urgent care. They said you need to go to the hospital like now. And what had happened was several years earlier, my appendix burst. And so from that surgery, some of the scar tissue had wrapped around my intestine and basically created choke point. And so had emergency surgery 2 days later. So on the day that I was supposed to run my 100K through the beautiful mountains of Virginia, I was pushing my IV cart very, very slowly around the hospital wing to try to recover. So I got back to running, recovered from that. Still wanted to do that race, UROC, as my first 100K. And so Boston was like 3.5 weeks ahead of it. So honestly, my first Boston experience was a training run. And, because I was kind of more attuned to wanting to complete my first 100K, which I did do that, 3.5 weeks later. So I didn't really race Boston. I just kind of had fun, just enjoyed it with 30,000 of my closest friends, and it was a blast.
That's awesome. And it's interesting because a lot of people like that race really means a lot to them, being able to get to it. Plus it's unbelievably hard to get into, because even if you hit the qualifying time, you're not guaranteed to get in based off of what everybody else's qualifying time is. And let's face it, it's always faster than what the initial qualifying time is. It seems like it gets faster every year, regardless of what age you are.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I don't think you're safe I don't think you're safe at 60 years old anymore to get into that. I mean, the times are not soft at all, right? So it's definitely a very tough race to get into. So you mentioned coaching a little bit. How did you get into the coaching scene?
Yeah, so I go back to the first coach that I had, and I was still being coached by her at the time, and I just said, I was looking for something else. I wanted to give back to the community that I think is so amazing. And I said, "Do you think I could, be a coach? And what would that mean?" And she said, "Yeah, absolutely. You could certainly do that." And she kind of walked me through what it would take to become a Road Runner Club of America certified coach. So I did that, and it's basically a weekend course in person that you go through, take a test at the end of it, and then you just have to keep your Red Cross training updated. So before that, I had 3 friends who I said, I'm going to be looking at becoming a coach. And they had, just generally from time to time asked me, about training tips and that kind of thing, which I was happy to share with them. And so when it got to the point where I got serious about this, I said, would you guys mind if, I did training plans for you for free, and I get experience, you get, free coaching. They all agreed. And I said, the only stipulation is, once I become certified, it becomes a payment thing, and they were all fine with that. One is still with me. One is a single dad who he went out and he did his goal and then was content to just keep on running. And the other athlete did really, really well with me, did a lot of great things. And then like I've done and others have done, just wanted to go in a different direction, got a new coach, which is totally fine and understandable. But they were all great to work with, and helped me kind of learn by doing. And now I have a good stable of athletes, one of whom just finished his first marathon on Saturday. And so, whenever they achieve these goals, it's pretty awesome. It's why I do it.
I think that's the most rewarding part, is helping people, right? And I tell the story a lot, but one of my favorite things to do is I pace at a local half marathon, which was my first ever half marathon, my first ever race actually, here locally. And it's just awesome watching folks accomplish their goals, right? I mean, because the people you're running beside, you don't know what they're going through, what it means to them. And I pace like the 2:15 group. And so I run with a lot of folks that work a lot, that don't have a lot of time to put in huge training plans. And so for them, this half marathon is like their A race for the year, right? And just being able to go out there and piece together a 2:15 half marathon means the world to them, because for them, they don't have the time that, say, you and I have to go out and run for 3, 4, 5 hours on a training run, right? Or run every single day, to accomplish these larger feats that we're accomplishing right now. So it's definitely very rewarding. So, and I think the other thing with that is like, when did you decide that, I guess I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. When did you decide that you wanted to, like, did you just immediately, like, take it out and go as many people as you could do, or did you keep it a small group at first? Because I know a lot of coaches limit how many people that they work with at a time. Did you kind of do that until you kind of got into the swing of things of dealing with multiple people at once?
Yeah, the three that I started with, all uh, were my first three real clients. And so I started with them, and I just used, kind of word of mouth, and, the website that I run, and use that to kind of promote that I was available. The female athlete that's no longer with me, she hooked me up with, I think, three of her friends, who are all runners. So that was a great way to, kind of get them involved too. And so the first coach I've mentioned, is Angie Spencer from Marathon Training Academy. And so I've actually I'm the only one to go from a client to one of their coaches. So part of being in their stable of coaches is, I need to have a minimum of 10 runners that, through them. So part of my stable right now is runners through Marathon Training Academy, and I have some on my own as well too. But it's been, kind of neat to be able to have my group, and also be, being able to be with a larger group that, I can learn from the other coaches as well too. And I learn from my coach every day, literally. He's very, obviously very passionate about the sport, and definitely has helped me grow as an athlete. So um, it's been great to be able to kind of pass on, the knowledge I get, whether it's from my personal coach, coaches that are peers, or just, the training, the resources, the new scientific, story of the week kind of thing, that I go through and, use that to help my athletes chase their goals.
It's really cool. And I think, it really is admirable, because it's, I couldn't, coaching seems like such a tough thing to do from the standpoint of like building the plan and then following up with people and keeping people motivated and keeping people moving. So I think that's just really awesome. So, um, switching gears a little bit,
Mhm.
one of the things that I think you do that's really cool is you have Runspirited. And so, I don't want to take away any glory from that. I just want to, you know, talk a little bit about what Runspirited is to everybody.
Sure. So professionally, I'm a writer editor. Am a communication. I have a communications degree, and immediately after college started working at newspapers, and I work for a large nonprofit now as in the media and communications department. So editing and writing are what I've done professionally, and I it was Run Spirit was just a way to combine the skills I've developed and the passion I have for running. And so it was something where I kind of started out, didn't really know where it was going to go. Just thought, again, this is a way maybe I can get back, do some stories on this and just kind of see where it goes. And, I just started reaching out to runners. And I found pretty quickly that the ultra and trail runners would almost every single time would be like, sure, I'll do an interview. Sure. Why not? And you've probably found the same thing in your guests. You've mentioned Jeff Browning and Corey and some others, and they're all incredibly happy to, jump in and talk about the sport. I've talked to some road runners as well too. Um, and, I think that um, definitely the trail and ultra elites are more willing to participate in that, and that made it real easy, kind of carving the direction that I wanted to go in, not only for my own running but for what Run Spirited evolved into. So I do stories on back of the packers, middle packers, front of the packers. I just look for stories that are going to resonate with people. It could be an inspiring athlete like the Camille's, the Courtneys, the Jeff Brownings, and others. But I also look for those stories of, someone who may have overcome an addiction or is trying to do something, really incredible, based on their history, kind of a thing. Um, and I also mix in, some coaching advice and, some product and gear reviews and that kind of thing. And, um, just try to keep my um, kind of keep the pulse of the ultra running community as part of what Run Spirited is. And, I've had a really good response, and it's just become kind of, a cool little side hustle I've got.
That's awesome. So, how did you kind of get, like, how did you kind of get connected to, like, to people? Did you get it? Did you make it through like your coaching friends, or did you do it through, like, say, just like a forum page or something like that? How did you, how did you, make your connections to get to where you are now?
I I think it goes back to like my first real ask, and that was Eric Senseman after he won JFK 50 in 2017, maybe. And I think I found him on Facebook and just reached out and said, congratulations on winning the race. Want to do an interview? And he replied, and that's been great. And in fact, he even recognized me when I was at the Chicago Marathon Expo, and this was years later after the interview. So that was great to, and that gave me the confidence. And in fact, I told him there, I said, you were like the first one that I asked and you accepted. And that was a game changer, because that, kind of opened the door to others and gave me that confidence to ask other elites. And like I said, they're very gracious with their time, and are, almost 100% of the time I get yeses. And so I think it was just, kind of following the sport and seeing, where those stories are. Sometimes it's the winner of the race, sometimes it's, someone else. But just seeing what's interesting, and, trying to look at the stories that maybe even haven't been told yet. A good example of that is I had a non-elite who I thought had a good story to share. And this was back in that same 2016, 2017. Years are hard after the pandemic, aren't they? Because
They are.
it's
Hard.
like the last 2 years, nothing, not nothing, but it's been this like odd lull. And so trying to go back beyond that is sometimes challenging. But anyways, this athlete I asked about in an interview before Western States one year, she agreed to it. And then as it got closer to the race, said, I'm really sorry, training's taking up more time than I thought. I really don't have time now, but I promise you after the race, I'll do an interview. I said, that's totally fine. And so that happened to be the year that Gunhild Swanson crossed the finish line, the oldest woman to finish the race. And she did it with 6 seconds to spare on the clock. And she came through, and I think I interviewed her the Monday or Tuesday after Western States. And she was the story that year. Rob Carr won the race, but the story was Gunhild finishing with, everyone cheering. And as the clock was ticking down, there were people, there was media on site, of course, that, told the story, but they didn't necessarily have all the details that we had during our long conversation about. And one I remember is that she got lost at one point running with her grandson, and sent him back to try to find where they went off trail. And he came running back to her, and got back on the right trail for the course. But, another minute of going the wrong way would have cost her that finish. And, it was just an amazing story. And, that was another one that was a nice indicator that I had something going here.
That's awesome. And, I think it's interesting because, like, it's funny when you do these interviews that you do, right? Sometimes, there will be one particular person that really captivates people, right? They listen to it and they listen to their story. And that person may not be that, that person that is winning all the races. It may be that person that's in the middle, or the person at the end that, like you said, that barely got the finish there, which that's a great story, right? And I think that that's what really resonates with people is, that's one of the reasons why I started doing this, was because I wanted to I like to talk to people about running. And so it just, like literally, when I was in the woods running with Corey, I think him and I literally talked about running the entire time. I can try to think if we talked about anything other than running. It's just crazy because I just love to hear what people like to talk about with their journey, or what they got planning, or what races they're doing. It's just like, it's just really exciting. So you have a newsletter, right? How often does your newsletter come out?
My newsletter comes out every Monday. It's called Monday Motivation, and it's just kind of a recap of stories that I put on my website in the past week, and also have some links to coaching tips, stuff from some of the top coaches that they put out in the past week, and just kind of a summary. And it's available. Just people want to if people want to subscribe to it, it's just my website runspirited.com. Upper right hand corner is where you just fill in your email address, and you'll get the next one. If you have the website is I need to go over and do a little upgrade to it. It's gotten a little flunky for I think upgrades that the provider has done recently. So if you can't find it there, you can certainly find me on the socials and just send me a message, and I'll send you a link to be able to subscribe to it as well too.
And so what I'll do is when I post the interview, I'll also will post links to all your socials and Runspirited and all that. So if folks need to find you, they can easily find you there. So I have to ask you what the last major question I have to ask you before we start wrapping things up is, when you're looking at Western States and Hard Rock this year, which race do you think has the deeper field?
Oh, that's a great question. There's lots of potential winners on both of those. I think I would probably lean a little bit more toward Western, but not by much. Without Jim Walmsley at Western this year, I think that really opens up the side for the guys. There's probably a good 10 elites who any one of them could finish on top. And then you have Jared Hazen, who has never won but has the second best time ever at Western States. He knows the course really well. Tim Tollefson is on a nice run and very competitive. You have Hayden Hawks, who is certainly incredibly fast. You have Drew Holman, who finished third last year, and you've got some others who are definitely going to be very competitive. On the women's side, Courtney was signed up. Unfortunately, she's not going to be racing it. Camille Herron is certainly has proven herself as far as a elite athlete. She hasn't had a lot of luck at Western, but maybe this is her year. You also have several of the other top women. Brittany Peterson is definitely going to be competitive, and you've actually got some others who finished in the top 10 last year that are back too. Katie Asmuth is another one who, to some I think was probably a surprise top 10 finisher last year, and she's back. So I'm excited to see how she's going to do as well. And then certainly, for Hard Rock, I believe that Courtney DeWalter and Sabrina Stanley are both on the women's side there, which should be a great race. Sabrina's won it the last 2 times it's gone off, and certainly is someone who can throw down at any race, and we all know how good Courtney is. So that I think that's definitely one to watch. And I know that there's a lot of competition on the men's side as well too. I believe that Francois Dehane is going to be back for Hard Rock again this year. So I think that will be, certainly he's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now on the men's side.
Is it Killian going to be there this year?
Yes. Yeah, you're right. I'm glad you said that. Killian's going to be there this year. I'd have to refresh my memory on others, but yeah, it looks like a pretty stout list.
Yeah, and Killian's coming off that big win that Zagame just had. He just he's one of those athletes where I was talking to someone the other day, and it seems like if he wants to win, it's almost like he's going to win. And you hate to kind of say it like that, but it's kind of like that's where he's at, and it's at kind of the level he's at. I'm interested to see if he shows up and does the same thing at Hard Rock, especially when you look at some of the talent in that field. The Courtney Sabrina matchup is definitely, I think, by far one of the sexiest matchups there from the standpoint of, not that not that on the men's side there's not, but Courtney is just a juggernaut, right? I mean, she just tends to win everything. And it'll be interesting to see how her and Sabrina go toe to toe. I'm just interested to see like what Killian does out there, because it's kind of one of those races where you're like, oh, Killian's going to be racing Hard Rock, right? It's such an odd, like he's one of those races where it just, who knows? And it's hard to say with him because he's such a talent, right? And I just can't wait to see what happens out there. So it should be pretty good. So
I think too, isn't Jeff Browning also signed up for it?
Jeff is out there. Jeff joked with me that he's going to be somewhere after those guys. He jokes, but let's face it, Jeff is a hell of a runner. And still just throwing stuff down. I mean, just crazy it's like him and Carl, they just don't really ever get bad, right? It's like they just continue to win and they just continue to get better as they get older, which is just remarkable. To be able in a sport like this that is known to beat your body up, how those two guys just continually show up, win races, set course records, set FKTs. Jeff is going after, I think he's throwing his hat in the 200-mile distance this year. So I can't wait to see what he does in the 200-mile distance, because he's such a talent. And I'm interested to see if he has the success at the 200-mile range that he's had in the 100-mile range, because he made it very clear that he was not going to catch Carl with the 100-mile wins, because Carl's never going to stop. So I told him that he needed to become the 200-mile specialist and Carl can be the 100-mile specialist. And he said maybe so. So I guess we'll just have to see, right?
Well, and if he does that, he's going to have to beat one of his athletes, because I believe he's the coach for Michael McKnight, who has made 200 miles, his thing. And actually, that's another one of my early profiles that I did on Michael McKnight before he really became, known to anybody. And his story is amazing. Came back from a broken back to now be one of the top, really long ultra winners.
Yeah. And one guy real quick, I was thinking about for Western States, I think he's still running it, is Arlen Glick. He, I think, is a real dark horse, because that guy has been throwing down some training miles and could be a real threat there. And he's a guy that you just don't hear a lot about, right? But he just silently just goes out there and just gets business done. And I'm interested to see where he falls in at States with all these superstars, right? So I think it'd be interesting to see how he does out there as well.
Yeah, so he's a good pick. I definitely see him in the top 10 for sure.
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt he'll be. Only way I see him not being in the top 10s if he DNFs, because the guy's just he's on a tear. So I think he could definitely make some noise out there. I guess the last thing is, what do you have going on? You mentioned Hennepin. Anything going on with like your blog or anything else you got going on?
Yeah, I've got a couple of races before Hennepin. After this comes out, in a week and a half, I'll be doing just a local 10K race, just something that I haven't done a 10K in a while, and it just lined up as something close to home and something I can do as part of just kind of seeing where my fitness is at. In August, I've got a trail marathon in Indianapolis that I'm doing. Looking forward to that. As I've done the race before, but it's a new course this year at a new location, so looking forward to that. And And then, it's Hennepin is the big build, and looking forward to going back to that. And, helping my athletes, more importantly, having my athletes, achieve their goals is a big thing. I have several who I have a couple who are chasing Boston, and a couple who are chasing their first ultras, and some others with some really cool goals as well. So working with all of them, and doing my best to help them succeed. And just, it's an honor to be on their journey. As far as Runspirited goes, this isn't public yet, but as soon as you hit the upload button, I guess it will be. I have from time to time on Runspirited, I do a little giveaway from some brands that are in the space, and I have to check, actually. I haven't gone through the box yet, but Nathan has sent over some of their new sunglasses. So to celebrate, I guess, the beginning of summer, we'll be doing a giveaway for 8 to 10 pairs of Nathan sunglasses. And what I'll do is I'll just pick people randomly who subscribe to my newsletter. So another plug for the newsletter: if you go to runspirited.com and sign up for the newsletter, you can also be entered in the contest if you follow me on Instagram, and just follow me there, and I'll pick some at random off of that as well too. It's real easy to find me on Instagram with an uncommon name, just at Henry Howard. And you can also follow my Runspirited page on Instagram, which is Runspirited with an underscore between the run and the spirited. So we'll put up a post maybe even this week on exactly all the details with the sunglasses giveaway, but that literally happened, it was confirmed today. So breaking news here on Jason's podcast.
That's awesome, man. Good stuff. So definitely give him a follow. Maybe you can get you a pair of sunglasses.
There you go.
So, well, that's going to be, it's probably going to be it for tonight's episode. Henry, I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me and go over, your running story with us all. As always, we'll be doing a video and audio version. I apologize for things being a little late. I've had some job stuff going on, and it's been kind of tough for me to get some scheduling stuff done, and I just haven't been able to keep up as well as I have been in the past. So I'm hoping to get back on track here and keep things rolling. So that's it for this week's episode. That's it. And I will see you on the trail.